Okay, I think we're live here. Um, I was on time, actually lean in, was a little bit even early, but there's a lot of stuff to move in here. And I did even have an initial trouble that I thought was really worrisome in, and I've got a Windows 2000 server behind me, and I've had this um, system, the same system. I'll go over the components in just a moment. In fact, let me go through and how are my audio levels if anybody is tuned in. I'm just showing 0 views for the moment. Okay, so we have a response from Hugh. Um, and good seeing you as well, Hugh. So I even still have the doors open. I have my van open. I'm going to be moving some clients systems in here. This Windows 2000 server is just as I had it set up at home in my shop, going through to get things working. And John Horvath was he had the right little bit of instruction to for the the thing that got it all working. Now, when I brought it up here, and I had a regular PS2 mouse and keyboard, but I had my M5 -2 off to the side, and that's where it's got the roller ball and everything else. And I did have had problems with this keyboard before on the thin clients and PCs and stuff like that. It complains about the pointing device port. Um, and that's what this did. I actually plugged in a USB mouse, and then the system told me operating system not found. And I thought, man, I need to pull the USB mouse off of there, get this thing to where we can boot up. There is one minor adjustment that I'll have to make on the network. I've got it set up that I should be able to um, put this over to the actually showing it on screen. And I did have it set up for 4x3, so I can actually go through and work with it. This has a relatively good video board in it. Um, but I'm ready to go for the server side. And that's probably the thing to do is let's see if we can get this switched over to, okay, and what I'll do here is to give that screen some input. And we'll sneak this around here. Not fastening any cords or anything like that. So I can go through. And I've not used the modder back here as a backdrop for a while. Let's see. Let's make sure. Because my clear click is really hidden back behind here too. And I want to go through and I want to do that's kind of stretchy. I was looking to go through, yeah, to get it into that mode. And we're going to go through and we're going to go up here. We're going to pan that over. And we are going to get back to where I'm on the screen. You can probably make me a little smaller. Not that I'll necessarily interfere with anything if if the webcam gets in the view of anything, I'll go through. Now I've got some even some black space over there on the lower right, but I guess I could have my emblem in there. So we've got this up on the screen. I'm going to go through. At least I have a way to. In fact, let me go through. I'm going to close doors just to get set up. I've got the cooler going too. The big part of this is I'm going to have to bring out that. Let me get my sign up on the air. Okay. I realize I have to get thin clients and think pads at the appropriate point here too to get set up. So I on this server, I I have to where the configure your server comes up, and we can probably even I'll probably just bring it up as a service anyway. So let's go through. We're just going to minimize that. I'm going to go through. I'm going to bring up the interfaces because there's one aspect that I do need to change for the network here, my uplink, and that's going through. And I'll go over these. Okay. So here it's actually 1, and here it will be 1. And I don't think that that'll necessarily mess with anything for how I've got the unit configured. Okay, 1 and 2. Okay. So, and this is kind of a, I'll bring up a probably a ping window or something like that. But we can see the interfaces on here. Let's go through even for our, I mean, we have sent, don't have necessarily received. I want to go through, I want to bring up some aspects of just making sure that we're live. We're going to go through, we're going to ping that we have internet connectivity. Okay. So we're able to hit the path out, our gateway out of the internet. And I'm going to minimize that as well. Let's go over our interfaces. And we'll go through and we'll get some of the thin clients, some of the ThinkPads and connected as well. So for the on this server, and this is a very modest unit for all it's worth here. This is so Microsoft Windows 2000 server with Service Pack 4, and this is I believe just a Pentium III CPU. I don't know the steppings and everything else off the top of my head, the speeds and everything else. I could go through and I could check that otherwise. But in fact, and then 256 megabyte of RAM. Actually, I want device manager. Okay, and I do have some devices. There's even a kind of a PCI bridge extension in here as well. And the audio controller, yeah, I'm not really necessarily worried about that at the moment. But so we have our uplink out, and I have these the same order that I had when I showed this about 2 years ago for the internet connection sharing. And at the top, I have a few blockouts here and everything else. So at the top, I have the gigabit interface here for my uplink. And that's going to a switch, a small little Cisco switch over here. I may have to kind of move these back as I go through and get the thin clients going. And below that, I have a 10/100 EtherJet network adapter. So that is Ethernet. That's the EtherJet. It's a particular product line of the 10/100 from IBM that they rebranded some of the Intel network adapters. I have that below that going to another switch. I've tried to go through for blue being Ethernet, green, and of course we see the labels with the green dots for the token ring side. Now, below that, I have the so-called 100 megabit token ring, and that is going up to the black MAW that I have up here on top. So just to kind of show, and this is type 1 connectors on the face of it. And in fact, we could go through, and even this, there's a missing foot on the bottom of the server. It makes it a little bit precarious as it is. So we have that going to the black MAW. Now, we'll have to go through and study a little bit more too on the 100 megabit token ring. I can show the interfaces for that as well. But that probably takes some other kind of MAW. As John found, it was there's another Madge or some other token ring manufacturer that had a 100 megabit per second token ring. It is an IBM adapter that's in there on the system, but this is set currently for the 16 megabit per second speed. So then below that, we have our main 16 megabit per second token ring. And this is the example I was trying to get running for bridging that over to an Ethernet connection, and as well as, and so in this instance with my internet connection sharing, I could go through and I could share one of the token ring interfaces or the Ethernet connection to the internet connection side, to my uplink, but only one network at a time. So then token ring, you have the 16 megabit per second speed. It's called a ring speed. And then the 4 megabit per second. And unlike Ethernet, like your 10/100 or even your 10/100/gigabit, you cannot have different ring speeds of token ring connected. You can't have the 4 and the 16 and the 100 when we get it going connected up to the same MAW or to the same switch or to the same hub. It's got to be on devices that are also set to the same ring speeds. So like the 4 megabit per second would be the older PCXTs or something like that, even though there is 8-bit adapters that go through and that are 16 megabit per second. You could have an older network that is at the 4 megabit range and then have a separate 16 megabit per second token ring network. Now, the very adapter on the bottom, that is the 4 megabit token ring. And last night, I even went through and I signed the guest book at the old net. And I got on through a ThinkPad that I set the PCMCIA adapters, because that's what we're going to get out as our examples for getting, the ThinkPads through online through the token ring interface. And but I actually had this one set to, and it's the so-called auto adapter. And even though these adapters, you can switch them between to run them either at 4 megabit or 16 megabit, it's easily set up within the interface under Windows for the driver to go through and set them. But I signed the guest book at the old net with 4 megabit token ring through a ThinkPad that's running Windows 98 bridged over to the internet that allowed my connection. So, we can go through. I have to make sure I don't necessarily dawdle on a whole bunch of time as well, to go through and to get things connected to actually be able to demonstrate this. Now, the 4 megabit per second token ring adapter on the server 2000 is actually the same adapter as a 16 megabit. These are twins effectively here. And that's what I'm doing on the Windows 2000 interfaces. I have one set to 16 megabit per second and one set to the 4 megabit per second. Logically organized, you can see as we have it set up here under Device Manager. I'm actually going to go through, I'll close out of the properties there just to kind of show that this is my uplink. I have a gigabit Intel board in there, as I said, at the very top. And going down to TCP IP properties. In fact, good thing I caught this, because nope, wrong place. This field. I would have also been wise to adjust the DNS for this location. Now, this address under this convention has to be set up statically on the network, basically, so that it's where you have the structure set up to where that is a gateway address out to the internet. I guess this particular one for the uplink could be automatic. Yes. For the gigabit Ethernet out, the uplink, this could be set under DHCP. And we could go through and play around with that as well. I've got it set statically in this case. Works perfectly fine. A more flexible situation for the server would be to erect however the IP address scheme is set up for your network. In this case, I could go DHCP. Now, I'm going to go through for this system is actually going back to my shop. It's going to be able to run the token ring network there. I'm actually going to go through and really kind of off camera over here to the side. is my Netfinity 7000, that big beast that I'm going to put more network interfaces on this. And it's also got Windows 2000 Server. And I'm actually going to mimic the same setup over here on the Netfinity 7000. So going through, we have the Ethernet for the 10 megabit per second. And that's that Ethernet, EtherJet PCI adapter. As I said, we've got that set to this instance. And in fact, I believe this is correct with having the default gateway here blank. We'll get to see the token ring. We'll actually see with experiments as we're doing with getting a machine, a ThinkPad, probably in this first instance online. I do have my my little PC 110 here that I found just last night as well, and I haven't had this thing start up, but this has an Ethernet out. This is actually running Windows 95. I've got to get the power supply in here, and I do have the dock for this as well. But going through to it's a little mini ThinkPad, as it were, to where we could even get this online. Be it that PCM say, hey, we could get this online through the token ring adapters as well. It's an Ethernet connection that's on here right now. And the so we'll confirm that that's saying that this is actually correct. We have basically a subnet set up for the Ethernet of 10.0 .4.220. Now, I'm not going to go through and change the octet on this because this really doesn't matter for this setting. I have my shop. I actually have, this is the IP address scheme for my shop elsewhere. Here at this location, when I set it up on the Netfinity 7000, I'll have 10.1. All the networks, all the subnets I have from this location are 10.1. And then further subnet and identification from there. In this instance, it does not matter. It does not matter for how I'm connected up with the various switches and things that I'll link in. That it'll be bridged all the same. You know, if it came to the point of impacting it, I could go through and change it anyway. Now, the token ring, 100 megabit per second. I'll have to use the air quotes. We can see there it's IBM high speed 100/16/4 token ring adapter. This adapter, and again, here's where we have the scheme of how it is connected. Now, and I've gone through, that's going to be an interesting aspect because I'm going through on my DHCP service, which we'll look here in a moment, and I'm actually supplying the router addresses and things like that. That's something, even though I'm supplying through DHCP, these are DNS addresses. We're going to go through, we're going to change these just for the instance. I want to go through and bring up all the extra tabs and everything else to show how that is. And for the network data rate, it's at 16 megabit per second. I don't know how with the driver, if it's set to automatically detect, and then you have the MAW in that theoretical case running at 100 megabit per second, that would connect on that way. but here we see the ability to set the ring speed of the adapter. And so this is basically just mimicking the same thing for 16 megabit per second with all the fancy settings that all the different abilities that this particular adapter is on Token Ring. We're going to go through, we're going to backtrack a little bit. Because I want to make sure that it's easy enough to just toggle these to the local settings. And that way we're sure that we're not going to run into anything. Here's the 16 megabit per second token ring. And as we see, the adapter is identified as 16/4. The IP scheme that we have here is the 10.0.3 network, which again, I don't have to necessarily change from this location. The DNS, I'm going through and updating it. The token ring, 4 megabit per second. Same style adapter. But we're going to go through, we're going to change that entry. Again, for the networking addressing, we don't have to really modify that at all. I can probably, let's go through and hide that. We're going to look at the DHCP next. This is actually, the way it's configured is a little bit strange. So the entry that it was putting in there for the IP address, and it actually takes a little bit, as we see, to go through and actually start up. The really interesting thing too was this has showed that it has started up correctly with the little up arrow, but I was actually getting an indication of the that the server had to be authorized to give out IP addresses, and under the in a domain Active Directory, you have to authorize the DNS server on your network. Or excuse me, you have to authorize the DHCP server on your network to be able to give out addresses. Now, I do have, so here is my 16 megabit per second token ring. I have the various pools set up for that. And we're going to go through, and this is interesting because this is actually showing the ThinkPad that I was using last night to go through and on this connection to go through and verify things. Now for the scope options, we're going to go through to the router doesn't have to be changed because that is the interface. It's here on the Windows 2000 server. DNS servers, I want to go through. I want to go through and get this set right. And you're all saying, gee, David, let's go through and let's move on to the to getting things going here. Oh, okay, I have to go through and add it back in. And I went through and removed it. And then it has to be added back into this game. Now, I don't think that there's necessarily any order that it does here necessarily. Remember, I'm going through and I'm imparting the like the home host for my AS400 stuff from the DNS server here. That's the primary reason I'd be putting it in here. I have, so let's go through. Just trying to quickly get in place. Okay. To where? Okay. No, 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 no. I need to follow along with what I'm doing. Keep my mind on things. Okay. That address. And that's what I was actually trying to do this morning, is get up here with enough time to go through and be able to modify these entries for the network that I have here. Lastly, this is the so-called 10 megabit per second. Okay. And okay, now that I have that set correctly, let's go through. We're going to go through and just minimize that. I'm going to bring up this is where the magic happens of the routing and remote access. I want to get this started up for the entries. And, you know, it was intention on the video here to go through and to show the settings. We're going through for when we're configuring this RRAS, the remote and a routing and remote access service, RRAS. That there we have all the routing interfaces. We're going through on the IP routing, and we're setting up the network address translation. I've got to where, okay, so this is the network address translation properties. You're logging, in this case, I'm choosing to log the maximum amount of information. And I'm going through for the address assignment, I have deselected. I'm not using this particular section as a DHCP service because I have the DHCP server running for all my subnets otherwise. I'll need to catch up on the comments here in a moment because I'm just churning away and talking, kind of stilted. So this is actually deactivated for this section. And then under the name resolutions, client using domain name service, resolve IP addresses for clients using domain names system, DNS. So the properties of this network address translation, this is my uplink side. Actually get to the meat of things here. Now for your public side, you're way out of the internet. The connection that you're using as your uplink, that is set up as a NAT because it is needing to do that network address translation from that public side effectively to the private side networks that you have set up. And it's able to do the multiple private side networks. So it's set like this of the public interface connected to the internet, translate TCP UDP headers. And of course, they're saying recommended here. We're not messing with any sense of the address pool. This is kind of interesting because it says your internet service provider ISP assigns this address pool. We're treating this effectively, this interface, the gigabit interface, as being on the internet, even though I have the router upstream of this. For all intents and purposes, the NATing that we're doing, going through and doing the routing, this machine feels, hey, that gigabit connection is my Ethernet interface. And I could even go through later on to treat in that NAT process, TCP or UDP ports in a particular way of what they are on the public side and what they are on the private side translated. So that's the public side. And then for each of the private side networks, those are set to private interface connected to a private network for all of these. The Ethernet, token ring 100 megabit per second, token ring 60 megabit per second, token ring 4 megabit per second. And the effective router that they have, there's no static route setup as of now. Under the general, and even so for some of the rolling statistics, that was probably last night. I'm trying to think where I'm going through. On the client, I can show that how the address assignment is done through DHCP, where it's assigned an address for that subnet mask. In this case, I'm using /24, 255.255.255.0. And the gateway address of the client system that's getting the address through DHCP from the server, the gateway address for that client is the IP address of that interface on the server, on the Windows 2000 server, because that is the address that's natted on this Windows 2000 server between networks. And so also these subnets are not effectively talking or visible under the setup to each other. They're just using all that one way out to the internet. And as I say, this is better than internet connection sharing because it's going through and also doing multiple networks at once. You're not just limited to one interface, one client network that basically you're putting on the internet. And you have a bigger selection with the DHCP server that I'm running on here as well. And I'm probably not tasking the system. It'd be the other aspect that I haven't touched on yet is we could go through and even monitor this on the task manager side to check the performance of how the system is effectively loaded as it does this stuff. Now, I don't think that I'm going through, even for this minimal or modest machine that I have set up here, I don't really think that I'm going to be taxing the resources with the routing and other things that are going on in this. Of course, we don't have any clients connected. Now, the one thing I did see last night as I was going through and monitoring my firewall, and I left the server running overnight, is I was seeing the gigabit interface of this server 2000 going through and really kind of a keep alive or a strobe with the uplink to where it was actually in connection doing data, even though the clients were not actively on the connection at that time. We could see it go through and strobe. I want to go through. We can minimize that. I'll have to look through the chat for questions, and I want to start going through that. I've been for close to about 45 minutes. If I just start on time again, that I want to get into actually having some of these clients resolve and everything else to show how this network is. Let me look through the chat stuff a little bit. And yeah, the chat is filled in for. Okay. Okay. And the weather in Scotland first. And I don't know if people have seen the northern lights. I saw a little bit of reddish glow even for as far south as I am in New Mexico. That last token ring DHCP scope, you missed the ad, so it only has public DNS servers. Okay. Um, I I think I may have caught that as I flipped back through, but we can and really that is, in a sense, it's unimportant in this case. The only thing I'm doing is I'm on my AS400, I am going through on those thin clients. I'm resolving uh, home host at ibmmuseum.com instead of using my public site address. And I do that through a DNS entry on the firewalls I have at the different locations, the two different locations. So it resolves that address correctly at each point. Um, the And yes, you are correct there. The DNS servers, okay. And that would be only, as I say, would only be important as we would do any DNS resolution on my local firewall as compared. And as I say, these aren't necessarily in any effective order as it is here. That it will reach out to one server before the others. I try and go through and, of course, have that DNS resolution locally first before it's passed to the public side. I don't think the order will necessarily impact things. Let me get the power supply for the PC-110. It's been a long time since I've had that thing fired up, and we may have to make some network adjustments on that too. And I started setting stuff aside. Brought up everything in mass. And it's a bit different from all the ThinkPad. Of course, I need to find out if I can run from a different header. Did I bring it in already? I know I bring the and I can go through and I can get a ThinkPad online too through the token ring. I mean, it's one of the big things I'd like to try. Let me see if I can get. Okay, that's. Grab it. There we go. Okay. Yeah, we'll just leave some of these ThinkPads. As I say, I want to get one of these ThinkPads, even though they have dual Ethernet and okay, that'll work real nice for that. Okay, and the battery is probably run down on this. Is like I say, it's been a long time since I've had it running. I can probably get by with just the built-in keyboard and track point. There's a little stylus that you could use as well. I forgot to bring any of that. We need a network cable, nice little shorty like that. So we'll go through and we'll do Ethernet first. The dock even has a way to go through and put it to a larger screen. Okay, and I'm going to have to get out my glasses because this is probably lost time and date, other sorts of information. It has been a very long time since I've operated this. Okay, and this is just like for configuration. And it's interesting for this, it's got the and so I'm going through and saying the time and date. I don't know if that LCD screen is very visible. I'm trying to see for and it's not a okay, can we do okay, 2022 024. Okay. Oh, it fills it in kind of from not that we have to be extremely accurate here. I don't know if I've had a. There's a little, as I say, I've got the dock for this too. There's a way to connect up a PS2 mouse and keyboard through the dock. It takes a little special connector for and I have to even get used to. I think you have to look at the button because I think beyond the stylus, I think you can go through. There's a kind of like a track point sort of interface here too. I realize that I'm going to get this thing on the internet and it's not going to be very a very visible thing on the screen that I can show. Okay. I had to look through. This may be just some old. Okay, so it like that. Some old password that I had. Yeah, that's kind of like a track point. And probably really hard to see the screen as well. I have to get Okay, so OK works. Okay. And of course, I have it set to the appropriate time zone. What we see is that, um, again, it's not really important to set the correct time. I get on these little nuances, my little OCD for, um, okay. So, okay. I'm trying to run the track point here. Boy, this is, and I know that this thing is really sensitive. Okay, okay, close enough. I want to get into the network settings of this too. Oh, that's like a right. Okay, so there's, okay. Blue button on there is the left, green is the right mouse button. Let's get the proper time set. Let's get into actually seeing some bridging going on here. Of course, everybody believes me that I was able to get this working. Thanks to John for the finding that article, because that was the big thing. So we're going to use this right mouse button now to, I forgot how sensitive. You definitely want a PS2 mouse on these things because it gets, okay, so there we have the TCP/IP. Okay, so we have obtained an IP address automatically. Probably for DNS, it's probably getting a DNS setting. Oh, actually, that's got old information. So we're going to set that to disabled with the DNS. And those DNS values are not appropriate. Okay. And this actually would be where we can run. Oh, okay. With the change of address with the DNS, it wants to restart. But now that we have the clock and everything else set correctly, that should restart pretty quickly. Let's start trying to get token ring on as well. Okay. I've got some ThinkPads around. I have to decide what is going to be. So that one, I think I'm going to have. Let's go through. Actually, this one should be good because we had this one for testing. Well, when we're doing through Ethernet, we can easily plug in an adapter, token ring adapter for this. I'm going to run power cord. And of course, we can do both Ethernet and... Okay, so let's go through. Okay. Let's do Ethernet first. Because I want to try the connecting onto my my S400 at home through Token Ring at the appropriate point here too. Okay, we're going to go on to the Ethernet interface. Okay. I'm sorry that that the stream has been more of the boring things of kind of me going through and trying to be organized. Okay. Get that ThinkPad going. And really for the sense of I want to get more focused on the token ring aspects rather than just showing it as it would be for the Ethernet, because that's not really any big deal at all. I wanted to get to a command prompt to do, as I say, with this, it's, and my dock also has the VGA connection. And so for Windows 95, I have to get, so Windows 95, it still has it as a command MS-DOS prompt. I want to run ipconfig. I don't know how I'm going to go through and hold this up to okay, Windows 95 doesn't do an ipconfig. I'm getting bad command or file name. We should be able to do a ping. Let's go through and ping by what I know. Okay, 0 dot. Okay. Backspace. 4 dot 220. No. Okay, so I'm getting a reply from the network interface on the Windows 2000 server. I want to go through to where I can't do a repeat on the command prompt as well. Let's make sure that I'm able to ping. Okay, I'm not able to ping the wrong address for this location. I was trying to ping the gateway, and I didn't remember off the top of my head that it was the different address. So I get the response from the gateway here. Well, I'm all going to that's not very visible for people. Okay, but let's do an Internet Explorer. I thought about going through and signing the the guest book on the old net again. I wish I could go through and show for the token ring networks, and this stream can go longer. I'm not in any time constraints today. But Internet Explorer 5.5. It'd be interesting to see what this shows as the home page. Now this PC 110, it's a 46DX 100, and it has 20 megabyte of RAM, and that's how I'm running Windows 95. Okay, and it's funny. I have this set to the IBMmuseum.com. What's the dialog box it's giving me? Internet Explorer install on demand. It's asking me to download a component. And I don't know if I necessarily... Vector graphics rendering. I don't think that that would be even successful. Maybe to let it try. No, it wants... So I'm going to cancel out of the downloads. But it goes through. If I can... In fact, if I had a longer network cable, I could do. But it's doing a... I mean, and I don't have my camcorder switched over. But this is able to be online through, bridged over. I have thin clients. Let me get a, this will certainly be a little bit more visible for the ThinkPad. I also have it on Ethernet. I can go through and I can actually adjust it. I have this one in the dock. I don't really need it in the dock. Let's go through. And certainly I could switch over to the back to the camcorder output. Okay, so properties, Ethernet, properties. This should be set to automatically detect. So on this one, and this is Windows XP. Okay. We're going to go through. On this, let's go through. Let's look at the... I know we have an IP config here. Windows 95 does not have an IP config. So we have the proper addressing here as we need to have. I'll have to look to see. That shows up a lot better. I'm going through. I'm going to print. I'm going to ping my gateway at this location. I make sure I've got the right address. Okay. So that's being assigned an address from the HCP server on the Windows 2000 machine. And then going through to be bridged over. Oh, that I'm hearing the sounds. That's my little PC 110 making the Windows 95 screensaver. So here, and this, it's going to the Ardent tool. So this is through the Ethernet connection. And okay, when IP config. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that they changed that. So here, and this is nothing new, for the power term, let's go through and let's try and access. the AS400 at home. And that's where I have that home host. Unable to connect. Okay, what don't I have? And that may be through all the natting response, because I'm using the port 23. So that would maybe require the, and it's good to check the baseline from Ethernet first. In other words, I bet I could go through and change this over to okay. So that's probably some aspect of the natting and passing port 23. So as a further test, and that tells me I'm not going to try it on Token Ring, or it wouldn't work on Token Ring until I get some things sorted out. So what we can actually do is if we shift, and XP at least won't have to be rebooted to resolve the address correctly. Now, so since we unplugged the Ethernet connection, we're going to run ipconfig again. Okay, so that got on my local network here. It's not going through the Windows 2000 server, of course. And of course, I expect this to fully work for the power term now. And I think it would be where it's going through and it's probably able to resolve. It's not going through to where it is to where that DNS resolution is failing. It's where there's something to the NAT and that port forwarding for port 23. So we've got Ethernet side. I want to go through and we've got okay. I've got the two different adapters here that I've left. I've brought up all my adapters actually. I want to go through. So we're going to go through, we're going to plug in the a token ring adapter. I want to go through and Windows 95 is, excuse me, Windows XP is so much easier to do. So here we have the token ring connected and assign the address. It's all been set up previous to this for getting the address automatically. So we can go through, we'll disable the Ethernet interface. And I forgot even to shift that cable back, but now we're on the token ring side. We're going to give, why are you? Like I say, I'm holding this dock, so it's going through and it's moving around a little bit. So there I'm assigned an address to the token ring connection to the Windows 2000 server. And I've actually got Firefox on this too. So there we're loading the Arden Tool site. Easy peasy through token ring. And that would also effectively work for the 4 megabit per second or the the so-called 100 megabit per second that is actually mimicking 16 megabit per second. If I shifted the um, to the MAW here, and in fact, I was thinking I had, let's try, because I can do, yeah, it's real easy for me to change, even to try to look at the aspect of like the 4 megabit per second is what I want to. And I wanted to even have where I had multiple stations, and I wanted to go through and do to where they were all connected up at one time and kind of show that off. But and certainly I can do that. I can pull out more of the ThinkPads, and I have the thin clients as well to get, okay, to where I think this will be a long enough run. I had an extension on it as well. I was going to go through and get fancy with all the now I even could probably throw on more than one token ring. Well, I think I tried before though, and it didn't work so well. Okay. So we're on the 4 megabit with this particular adapter. I think I'm actually going to go through and I'll switch out on the ThinkPad, even switching out the whole adapter. And XP, it's able to work better on the fly, of course, of these connections being hot swappable and things like that. Let's go through, even though there's 2 PCMCIA slots. Well, let's go through and let's try that first. Let's see if it does a recognition of that second. Yeah, so it didn't act like it liked. It didn't like to have 2 token ring adapters. It just doesn't recognize the second one that's inserted. I think I tried that before one time. And it'd be interesting whether you could have 2 with Ethernet and token ring PCMCI adapters. Okay, I'm waiting for this to be. It's not recognizing the. I'm not seeing it recognize the adapter. Oh, there we go. Found new hardware. Maybe I just need to give it time before. And so in this case, I'm actually going to go through. We'll let it go through and the found new hardware. Before it puts it up there. And I'll have to go through and switch the ring speed on this adapter to the 4 megabit per second to match what it is for my MAW connection there. And so for the properties, excuse me, for the token ring adapter in it, Okay. So under advanced, we're going to do network data rate. It's set to M16 right now. We're going to change that to M4. And we noticed that the connection was showing disconnected when we had that mismatch of ring speeds. So now we have connected, and we could even go through to call this token ring 4 megabit per second. Okay. So under the IP config, we have the appropriate address, just the way I have my subnets. The 0.6, the 6 is the subnet for the 4 megabit per second token ring. Just as I was going through and setting up my subnets. I meant to give a list earlier to show how it's doing things, but it's got the correct gateway address of the 4 megabit per second adapter. It's at the very bottom here in the server 2000. And, this, albeit at a slower speed, we could go through and we could go non-IBM systems. Okay. So it graciously went through, figured out the routing to go through and update the web browsing area. I didn't have to even close and reopen the browser. But that is, so it's going through to doing the 4 megabit per second token ring. We still have the PC 110 on that 10 megabit per second. I realize everybody's watching the pipes here too on the I'm trying to show the things on screen. And let's give a view of even like the static routes, because these are the, you could get the same thing by the route print command at the command line. But these are the effective routes that are running right now for the Windows 2000 box. And it's good my picture's not in the way of anything. And I wanted to show there's other stats you can get off of this too, like the network address translation. Now for the client networks, it doesn't pull up any information. As we see, we've got these mappings, total mappings. And so, looking here, we can see, and some of this is from last night, some of the entries, but we've also gone through and we've set up for the 4 megabit per second token ring. And we can see all the stuff that it's going through and mapping UDP and TCP. So, and then of course the UDP being DNS, the DNS aspect to it, and then the TCP that we've got those connections going, showing the mapping, showing the effective. In fact, let's go through and expand that window. We just can't double click and have it maximize. There's quite a bit of information that we'll have to go through and scroll around, but it gives all the statistics here and what remote address it's going to. We could go through and track to where that DNS resolution for the Ardent tool, other information there. And so that's some of the statistics, as I say, for the it doesn't populate that for the for the for the private networks. This apparently is dealing with that NAT interface. What is NATed? What goes across that network address translation? I'm trying to think of. Okay, so we DHCP. There's some messages that for the some statistic basically of the DHCP allocator information. DNS. I don't think I have DNS proxy set up, but and then there's always the ability from this. What I see is that's really nice is the ability to go through and export the list into the tab delimited file. So I could go through and effective for this configuration, I could save that as text files. And just as a way to be able to demonstrate things as well. Now, in the future, we can see that AppleTalk routing is set up. Well, it's there. It's able to where Windows 2000 can do AppleTalk routing. There's the provision. If you have an adapter for AppleTalk, and I may have one, I know I have one for the PS2 side, for the microchannel side. So there's my client effectively that wouldn't even necessarily have to be an Apple product. Although I do have also Macintoshes or something else that could be set up for the AppleTalk. But if I had, say, an adapter for AppleTalk to put in a Windows 2000 server. Now this is totally PCI. It's got AGP on it. But it's got PCI. It even has a little extension for the PCI. It doesn't have any ISA slots, but my NetFinity 7000 does. So the thought is, if I could get an ISA AppleTalk card, I know that they're out there. To pop in my NetFinity, I could go through and I could also route for AppleTalk. And it's also the possibility of going through and for the FDDI stuff that I'm talking about later on, the ability to go through and that being another interface, another private network I could set up from the NetFinity 7000 being probably that ISA card. We didn't have the PCI adapters look like they work for with the RS6000 systems, but could go through and even set up routing for that. So it's a nice way with a modest machine, Windows 2000. You could put that, you can load that on as I have here, a Pentium III system, some desktop basically that has enough slots for supporting the various networks that you want to do. And I even have to look, I looked on eBay, I'm trying to find some of the triple streamer or even a dual streamer token ring adapters. So I think I have some around too. But to go through and that being able to save a PCI slot with like a dual streamer, you could have one network set up as the 4 megabit per second, the other as the 16 megabit per second. And just going through to where you put those interfaces in. I need to go through and document, show with screenshots and things like that. The possibility exists for doing that on video or other means of just going through these screens and showing the configuration, even for being once I go through and set it up on the NetFinity 7000, because as I say, I already have Windows 2000 server on there. I already have DHCP set up for the 16 megabit per second token ring side, but going through and configuring that RRAS, the routing and remote access service on the NetFinity 7000 to go through step by step of the the steps to get this configuration running. And it's a nice little thing to where it's aside from the bridging that we're trying to work on the Cisco and the IBM 2210. And it has its own little deals because, as I say, these subnets are not visible to each other. At home, I have ThinkPads that are on the same work group, but if they're connected up to the different interfaces, they're not seeing each other right now. There would be other provisions that would have to be put in place for those subnets to go through and be able to see each other, to be able to see a station on one of the other networks. And that may involve just a whole bunch of like static routes being set up. I tried playing with that a little bit last night. In this case, I think the netting aspect is also what is interfering with that too, because each interface is effectively netted to the internet in this situation. Without necessarily having the netting in place, there's the possibility to set up those subnets. This is just further configurations of those subnets being able to talk without necessarily having that internet uplink. And that might even be ideal for some of the older networks, so some of the older systems that you don't really necessarily have a need to get them on the internet, or even to set up the Windows 2000 server as a file server. It's connected to the internet. You could go through and pull a file down and have a directory that's shared on its main network that would be accessible from the other side networks for transferring things like for making like a reference disk or getting an ADF, basically the Arden tool, where you could download it to the Windows 2000 server and then transfer it, or even make the diskette on the Windows 2000 server to get it set up for those older stations, those PS2s, and may not have a need necessarily, or even older IBM PCs. We could get that on through the token ring network here, that they may not have a need to necessarily get on the internet. It's beneficial to network them together. Now, the reason that we're looking at the 16 megabit per second token ring as being a nice network for systems like PS2s is the fact that even the 10 megabit per second Ethernet adapters are very hard to find in microchannel form, or going through that there's other things that have, you can get an Ethernet adapter, but it has an AUI connector, or the 10 base 2 connection, the coax connection. And in my mind, token ring, besides the fact of being 16 megabit per second, can be a faster than the Ethernet adapter you're able to get for the PS2s in that microchannel form, as well as, there's no real true 100 megabit per second Ethernet adapter in microchannel form. And so that's a way, we looked at, later on we'll look at the FDDI interface, and that's interesting for the fact that you could have 100 megabit per second network interface in microchannel form with that FDDI, but you need other networking components, those fiber connections, which are expensive, and also the concentrator unit. Now, for token ring, you do need the cabling here. I just stuffed a lot of cables in the vehicle as I coming up here. And then, of course, you need a MAW or a switch, like my 8239 off to the side here. We're going to look at other aspects of even fiber interconnections between those and things like that, of linking MAWs, of going through to how a token ring network is set up. There's different hardware, of course, that you have to involve, but it is going to be very much easier to find a token ring adapter in the microchannel form for the PS2s, even with the older PC XTs and things like that, those token ring adapters there. I want to get to the point where for the different Ethernet adapters, of course, they have to have different drivers in place of how you get on to a network. And I think the same thing can be done for the token ring side, to go through and have a common file area that can be developed. And especially for this PCMCIA adapters, I'm trying to go through and have a list of all the files that are needed under the different OSs, and basically have installation packages that you may come into a case. Like I've got some Windows 98 ThinkPads that don't go through, and they're not able to load the files, the drivers that are needed easily. They don't have the repositories, the same repository as was later on in Windows 2000 and Windows XP, of course. So I want to kind of get a file library of all that stuff too, to make it easier for the token ring networking. Even though the ThinkPads I have also Ethernet that's built in, they're excellent test workstations because I can go through and I can plug in that PCMCI adapter, token ring, and to get to just disable the Ethernet interface to go through and verify which connection I'm having connected. Now on the ThinkPads with that built-in interface of the Ethernet and also the token ring adapter, you can have both of those interfaces active at the same time under Windows XP. And the system shouldn't be necessarily confused on what interface it needs to use, or mixed up to some stuff goes out one adapter, some stuff goes out another adapter. I think it should be able to resolve that. But we even have, so I changed the network connection around. I want to do one little final test. I have the token ring 4 megabit per second connected on right now. And also I'm going to go through and activate the Ethernet. Now this is not possible under Windows 98. Has to have a primary interface that is active, and the other interface is disregarded if you go through and try and use it. But for an IP config, we get both adapters being active at this point in time. And you'd even have to see through the statistics on the Windows 2000 machine or something else of if this thing launches a web page. Let's go to the Mozilla. That it would, the one thing that'd be really interesting too is connecting up the Ethernet interface to that uplink again, and have the token ring networked in to where if I would try the connecting up to my AS400, of it knowing how to resolve that address and what interface to use in that instance, versus the and as a way to go through and resolve that. It'd be interesting to see how the system is able to go through and what it's using. Now, I don't know, for bringing up the ARN tool page here, I don't know what interface it's using, whether it's using the 4 megabit per second token ring or whether it's the Ethernet side. I don't know on what work groups I have set up to what this will. And that's interesting because that, I think, is the PC 110 here. That's interesting. That's not this system, I don't believe. It's not the name of this system. Oh, it is. Okay. So I'm looking at this. I'm seeing this system. I'm not seeing the PC 110 through like the Ethernet interface or anything like that right now. I'm seeing just this local system. But that would even be a way on some of these systems to have where with the multiple interface Ethernet and token ring on what other networks, whether their stations are on the other networks, to how visible those are over a work group. But I think it's a pretty good demonstration of things of showing how these stations were able to connect. Let's get out the, as I say, this PC 110 that's going through its little screensaver and the chips that are rotating. Kind of a little cool little thing, you know, there. But I want to run that WinConfig command too. I need to find my dock and connect up a PS2 mouse and keyboard to be able to run that through these things. The one thing that we didn't, that I talked about, that we really didn't check out is how that performance over time, you know, this routing stuff and DHCP issue in particular, once that DHCP address, I have it set currently for 8 days. So once it issues that address, it's through, you know, as far as everything that the DHCP server does for the clients. And of course, you can add on more clients, but that is not going to take any processing overhead. But we see, you know, there, the routing stuff is not going to take. I just wonder if I lost power by bumping the connection. I had my screen go away. I was going to run that WinConfig. How did I lose? Yeah, I must have bumped something. No worries. We didn't have it start up again. Just moving that thing around that bumped some power connection or something else. I want to run that WinConfig and see to see how that reports on the Windows 95 as well. But it's very easy to go through that IP config and to see the addresses that are being assigned for the subnets and seeing it bridged into everything. But yeah, a very modest system there that's going through and running the show. So yeah, let me get through, make sure I've. Okay. Okay, yeah, that WinIP config that we'll try. And and that is, no problem. We're happy to be here. I was very working with John last night. I was very glad that I was finally able to get things going because I just was sitting there struggling, and John knows where I've wanted to go through and have actually a project, a live stream that I conduct, wrap up and have some solution at the end and work, because the Cisco routers and the 2210, trying to do this bridging, I was so frustrated with going through to trying to get things um, running and just stumbling so much. And that's, we're going to still be addressing things. As I say, this is just kind of a partial solution as it is, but it works pretty good for the aspect of getting the token ring networks connected to the internet, having that uplink, uh, and can be adaptable enough for people to go through and to set up these networks and to use token ring as the way to do that for your network. We do have a group on Facebook for token ring that that I can probably go through and link. So I'll provide the link in the group. Just some of the things that is possible out there for people that do things like Facebook. That it's a way to have where we that's the places where we collaborate a little bit or kind of show some of these in more detail. But here's the link to the token ring group. And so that's been I think this has been a real good stream. I don't know if anybody has any further questions on this, or whether I went through and showed enough of how the setup is here. Let's run. I have to be very careful with, and this this track point is just so sensitive. It was kind of cool getting this getting this PC 110 online though, and even though it's through Ethernet, as I say, I could go through and I could swap that out for the token ring. And certainly for the Windows 95 level, that's an easy way to make sure that it's got that I can list the files that are needed for the OS of the things like PCMCIA adapters, or even the common 8-bit or ISA adapters as well, or also the microchannel. Okay, when IPCFG. Okay, and it's interesting. It gives a. I'm kind of worried about how I'll bump this again. I should have given this a longer network cord too, but it actually gives a Windows dialog of the to how that the address is shown. Let me go through. I want to switch back. I don't know if there's any other section that we can necessarily go over on the server. Like I said, I was looking if I was able to present that well enough to people. To go through my clear click is just out of the server kind of obscures, I guess, the remote sensor. Okay, so let's go through. I want to get that back to here. Okay. And I'll adjust the screen a little bit too. Okay. To get this fully back in here. I wanted to get the camcorder output up just to kind of show. This is that kind of cute little screensaver for Windows 95. And you'll see the chips that are be on screen, that they do the little tumble. I thought it's a really cool screensaver for the PC 110, and it gives the beeps when the chips and things like that collide. But so there is the Win IP config dialog. As it shows the adapter I have on there, but the MAC address, even the IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and just a way to go through and work with releasing. So quite a bit different. You know, you type out on the later IP config, you type out the command line, and it gives you all the command line response. Windows 95 giving you the windowed dialog of how it is. You know, they even have more info. It's amazing. The interface is so different. I don't know if I don't think they kept the Win IP config around for. I was wanting to see what that more info will do. Where is my mouse pointer? Oh, there we go. So more info, but that, you know, that's kind of cool for the graphical. Wow. And it does have okay. For going through and getting more info, it has if I can go steady enough. But there's the settings for that. Gives the DNS addresses, and it looks like it pulls that as I went through and adjusted those DNS settings. It is pulling that public side DNS for Xfinity. But it's got when the lease is attained, when it expires, probably to the same equivalent as the IP config /all command does. But really kind of a cool thing to see for the PC 110 running Windows 95. So, but that's been a really good stream. As I say, I don't really necessarily have to go through and cut this short. It's coming on even close to our second hour now, almost. If I would start on time, and so I hope that's been a good demonstration, although just in my style of very stuttering, stammering, going through for the live stream. And took me a little bit of time to get set up. I was looking at being a little bit more to where I could have gone over the, everybody's seeing my key code for the, I think that is even, yeah, this is the Windows 2000 Professional, funny, the key code here. And I think I went through and I loaded the Windows 2000 server on this machine. But yeah, I was looking at being a little bit more organized and having a few different ThinkPads out there, all able to display pages at the different times for being up on the with their own network connections and things like that. But it came out being, I think, good enough for this situation too, and how I pulled things out. I'm going to continue actually even pulling out some thin clients and stuff like that, and doing some further work at this location to put stuff on the Netfinity 7000. I want to go through and start doing the same sort of routing using that RRAS, the routing and remote access server. It's going to be routing and remote access service. It is a service on the Netfinity 7000 as well. So, but thanks to everybody for tuning in. That is all I have for now. You'll see more on this content and a little bit more of the screens I can provide, and a little bit of the rundown for how this Windows 2000 server is configured at a later point. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.